Hello and welcome to Spardha Lines, your one-stop destination for the civil services preparation, UPSC, KPSC and other relevant examinations. Today we picked up a couple of important articles from the Hindu which are very significant from your UPSC and your KPSC examination point of view. Let's get started and look into the first article. Before that, a quick gentle reminder. As you all know, we've been conducting the test series. The first test series was successful. The current affairs test part 1 was highly successful. Many students participated as well and they got to know how to take up this examination, what are the ways and means we can eliminate some of the options and the tricky positions that one would be able to take up in the real-time examination. The second test will be on 3rd of December 2023. So what is that you have to do? Subscribe to this test series so that you understand the real meaning of actual test series. So let's get started and look into the first article. The first article in this speaks about the Supreme Court of India. So this article primarily says that there have been a couple of issues with respect to the Supreme Court of India. If we can bring about a change with respect to the modalities and the way that the Supreme Court functions, what we will have is true Supreme Court which is looking into the constitutional matters rather than taking up every single matter. So this article says that there are a couple of concerns. These concerns will have to be addressed so that the real meaning of Supreme Court is given its meaning. What are the issues that the author tries to speak about? The author first here brings into picture what is the work of the Supreme Court. When we speak about the Supreme Court has 3 jurisdictions, which means to say that it has original jurisdiction, it has appellate jurisdiction, it also has advisory jurisdiction as well. What is this original jurisdiction? When I say original jurisdiction, if there is an issue, that issue will directly go before the Supreme Court of India. So what are these issues? Let's say for example, if there is a dispute between the central government and the state government, so can they approach the High Court? No, it's a dispute where you have the central government, the union government on one side and the state government on the other side. So this is a dispute between the central and the state government, directly approach the Supreme Court. So for those areas where you would be able to approach the Supreme Court directly rather than exploring other options is what is called as the original jurisdiction. And as part of the assignment, you have to put on the comment section in which article is the original jurisdiction defined. Please put it on the comment section. So what is original jurisdiction? Central government and the state governments have an issue, or one state government and another state governments have an issue. In all these cases, what you have is these people, these institutions directly approaching the Supreme Court, which is called as the original jurisdiction. What is this appellate jurisdiction? Appellate jurisdiction is where you have the series of courts that come into the picture. Let's say for example, we have the trial courts in India, followed by the High Court in India, and ultimately what we have is the Supreme Court. So the first court that we have is the trial court, followed by the High Court and then ultimately Supreme Court. So you go to the trial court, you have a decision that is made, you do not like this decision or the decree that is passed by the relevant courts. So what do? You immediately approach the High Court. The High Court will look into the substantive question of law. Apart from the facts and the law that is present, what is so different and unique in this particular case? I may have to convince to the court of law that there is something unique, so there is a substantial question of law. And when I am able to recreate and create a question of law, I go before the High Court. The High Court looks into this entire scenario and it ultimately passes a judgment. Again, you're not happy with it. So what do? You ultimately go to the Supreme Court of India. So what do we mean by appellate jurisdiction? So you're not happy with the decision of one of the courts. So you go on an appeal to another court and from there you go to the Supreme Court. So this is what is called as appellate jurisdiction. And finally, what we have is the advisory jurisdiction. What is this advisory jurisdiction? Let me give you an example. Let's say for example, the President of India has a question. So whom does he clarify? We know for the fact that the question is about the interpretation of law. So what does this President do? He asks the Supreme Court, "Dear Supreme Court, I have a question. So please answer this question." So when the President asks a certain question or seeks the advice of the Supreme Court, that is where we have the advisory jurisdiction. So the President is seeking for some advice from the Supreme Court, which is called as the advisory jurisdiction. This is one part. Then the author says that we have master of the roster. What is the master of the roster? When it comes to this Supreme Court, it is the Chief Justice of India who is the master of the roster. When it comes to the relevant High Courts, it is the Chief Justice of that High Court who happens to be the master of the roster. What do we understand by the master of the roster? When I say the master of the roster, let's say for example, there are environmental related cases, or let's say for example, we have the constitutional matters, or let's say for example, we have the public interest litigations, or let's say for example, we have the criminal petitions that come into the picture, or for example, we have let's say we have criminal appeals or POXO related matters, something like that. So in all these cases, we have different kinds of matters. Who will listen to what? That will be decided by the Chief Justice of India in the Supreme Court, by the Chief Justice of relevant High Courts in the High Courts. So what do? They arrange the benches. You have a single person who will be listening to the case. So you will have a single judge. Then you also have is a division bench, and if it is a constitutional matters, you will have 3 people sitting in a particular bench. So what you will have is judges sitting and listening to a case and ultimately coming to a conclusion. So who assigns these cases to the judges? That is the master of the roster. That is another concept. What are constitutional benches? Constitutional benches are something related to constitutional matters or a major interpretation of a law. So if we are speaking about constitutional benches, if at all judges are sitting in numbers of 5 or in 7 or in 9 and more, that is what is called as the constitutional benches. So minimum 5 people sit, they decide on a question of law. Recently we did discuss about the same-sex marriage, where you had about 5 people who were discussing about this question of law. So if there are more people, 5 and above, and usually when it comes to the constitutional matters, what you will have is the odd numbers. Why? That is because when it is odd number, the primacy is given to the majority viewpoint. It can be 3 judges, it can be 5 judges, it can be 7 judges. So primacy is given to the majority, which is in odd number. So that is what is constitutional benches. So the author in this particular case goes on to say that only when it comes to the constitutional matters, major interpretation of the law, it is the Supreme Court which has to listen to it, cater to it, and ultimately come to a conclusion. But then what's happening in most of the cases? They are taking a lot of appellate cases, they are discussing the legal issues which may not be the right for the Supreme Court to discuss. So as of now, we have as many as 79,813 cases pending before the 34 judges of the Supreme Court. When are we going to dispose of all these matters? If we continue to rely on all these matters which are coming every now and then, the real purpose, the constitutional picture, the substantive question of law, these will not be interpreted by the Supreme Court of India, and ultimately what we will have is pendency of cases that will ultimately continue to persist in the Supreme Court of India, says the author. In fact, we have the division benches. When I say division benches, it includes 2 judges, or full benches, which includes 3 judges, to examine a wide range of topics. But then since they are constantly involved in these cases, they will not be able to take up the real purpose cases, says the author. This is where we have had the law commissions in the past who have come up with the recommendations. In March 1984, 10th Law Commission of India proposed that the Supreme Court be split into 2 divisions. One is the constitutional division, the other is the legal division. In fact, the 11th Law Commission stated in 1988 that dividing the Supreme Court into parts would make justice more widely available and would significantly decrease the fees that the litigants have to pay. In fact, they also go on to say appeals in the top court mostly comprise matters from high courts that are closer to the Supreme Court. What do I understand by this? Let's say for example, when it comes to the Supreme Court, where is Supreme Court present right now? It is in New Delhi. So which are the courts in and around New Delhi? What we have is the Delhi High Court. Then what we have is the Allahabad High Court. Whichever courts are close by to Delhi, for example, we also have the Punjab and Haryana High Court. Whichever courts that we have close by to Delhi, these high courts will ultimately have advocates who will also go to the Supreme Court. So most of the cases that are in Supreme Court are only with respect to those high courts which are close by to the Supreme Court. So there are many cases that are going by, and ultimately there are pending cases as well. So this is where the author also says that the 229th Law Commission report recommended recommended 4 regional benches to be located in Delhi, Chennai or Hyderabad, Kolkata and Mumbai to hear on non-constitutional issues. What do we mean by it? Let's say for example, if you have taken the example of Karnataka High Court, what do we have? We have Kalburgi bench. We also have Dharwad bench. Similarly, if you take the example of Maharashtra, what you also have is the Nagpur bench. If you take the example of Madras High Court, what you also have is the Madurai bench. What do we understand by this? That there are benches that are created for the High Court. The High Court is one, but there are benches, which means these judges also sit in so and so place, that if there is a matter from a specific jurisdiction, that will be heard in that jurisdiction itself. What is the advantage of it? The advantage would be people have to don't go back to the national capitals as well as to the state capitals. Similarly, when we go speak about the Supreme Court, where is it present? It is present in New Delhi. There are no benches of the Supreme Court, let's say in South India or in the eastern part of India or in the north eastern part of India, and as a result, all the litigators who have a problem with respect to a particular subject matter will only have to go to Delhi. So the minute they have to go to Delhi, they have to shell out a lot of money as well, and at the same time it is only advocates who are present in this part of Delhi who would be getting the cases as well, and at the same time the litigation cost would also be exponential. These people will have to go from the southern part of India, eastern part of India, western part of India, and ultimately will have to stay in New Delhi for a specific period of time. So they have to also require accommodation. This is an extraordinary costly affair, and when it comes to litigation, you also will have to shell out money as well. This ultimately means more are present in the litigation, more number of people have to go to Delhi, they have to make use of the services of the advocates, which in itself is a costly affair. So why not open benches within, let's say, southern part of India, anywhere like Bengaluru or in Chennai or in Hyderabad, so that if there is a regional one, these benches would be able to discuss ultimately all the appeal related matters. If it is a constitutional matters, what we can have is one Supreme Court which is present in Delhi, discuss the constitutional matters. What if it is about appellate jurisdiction? What is it if it is about divorce matter or criminal related matters? In all appellate courts, what we can have is these regional benches. So if we have regional benches, the appellate responsibility will be taken up by these regional benches, and ultimately we would be breaking down them into legal as well as the constitutional matters. So the legal matters where we have the appellate jurisdictional functionality, that can ultimately be clarified in the regional benches. But if it is a major interpretation of the constitution, or they are coming up with a major doctrine in itself, that can be given to the Supreme Court at the national capital region. Let's say for example, in the criminal petitions, what we have is one of the doctrines called as the rarest of the rare doctrine. If there is some question of law, if there is some new interpretation that is being made, let's send it to Delhi. Let's have a constitutional court where you have all these people, judges sitting up together and deciding on a particular subject matter. But if it is just an appellate matter where it is about divorce matters, or for example the criminal issues, or it is about the property matters, in that case, why go to Delhi to decide all these cases? Why not have a regional bench so that all these issues can be ultimately sorted out and litigation costs also reduce over a period of time? Such things will ultimately ensure that people would actually get justice, because they have to shell out a huge amount of money. This can be avoided. So the author in this particular case goes on to say that if we are able to address all these matters, what we will have is true justice delivered to the people of the country, says the author. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Maoism. What is the article speaking about? The article currently goes on to say that there are districts in Chhattisgarh which are the heartland of the Naxalism movement. So there are a couple of areas or pockets where a lot of Naxalite activities or the Maoist activities is taking place. But over a period of time, what we have is the drop in the Naxalite movement. So the author says that there are a couple of reasons for the same. First, we have to understand why Maoism or the Naxalism exists. When we speak about Naxalism, what is the meaning of Naxalism? So we have one of the places called as Naxalbari. Where is this Naxalbari? It happens to be a place in West Bengal. So it happens to be a place in West Bengal where this actual movement started. What happened in Naxalbari? Because it started in Naxalbari, this movement went on to become Naxalism. So there is a thin line of difference between Naxalism and Maoism. Naxalism as a concept originated in India, where in Naxalbari in West Bengal. What is Maoism? So there were certain concepts which Mao, who happens to be the founding father of China, or he says that power comes from the barrel of the gun. So it was a concept which was imported and partially ingrained into an Indian Naxalism movement. So if certain principles of Mao happens to be included in Naxalism, and then it is given a new shape, that becomes Maoism. So what is the difference? Naxalism is a homegrown movement. Maoism is basically Naxalism movement. A certain ideological viewpoints are added into Naxalism, primarily turning into Maoism. Both are similar, but only thing is certain aspects of what Mao envisaged in China, a certain aspects are added into this knowledge base, and that becomes Maoism. So what was originally happening in few parts of the country? Originally, if you take the tribal people, they had huge swathes of land. This entire system of government wasn't prevalent. So what they had were huge swathes of land, and everything was under their control. But then what happened? We have the government that came into picture. We also have the bureaucracy which came into picture. You also have the police departments and couple of organizations and institutions that came into picture. So these tribal people were not happy with the bureaucracy. Why? Because the bureaucracy was acting in a very narrow, myopic way. How? For example, they were holding a piece of land. This piece of land they have been developing for a very long period of time. So this ultimately became the ownership of this piece of land was ultimately held by these tribal people. But what did the bureaucracy do? The bureaucracy started interfering in the affairs of the people, one, and the bureaucracy also ensured that they were suffocating this general people as well. Their land was also taken away from them. They did not have any livelihood means and mechanisms, and these people, once they entered into an urban area, felt that the urban section of the people had all kinds of varieties and the infrastructure that is required for them to develop, but this section of the people in the tribal heartland were not given enough infrastructure. So what they wanted to do was to overthrow a certain section of the people and the government, and wanted to have their own set of people governing that particular locality. So Naxalism started in Naxalbari in West Bengal, and ultimately people who were not happy with the government, those people who were not happy with the institutional setup, all came up together. They came up with an ideology. They said that we will rule ourselves, we do not want the government, and ultimately took upon the government. They did not respect the government, primarily not because they did not want democracy, but primarily because they were not happy with the government and the missionaries of the government. They were constantly put into a toxic environment. They were not given the basic infrastructure. They were not given the basic amenities that were required. Food, education, health, these were the basic amenities. When such people are not given such amenities, obviously people will be repulsive. Obviously people will start rebelling against you. They will start not trusting you and believing you and the institutions that you have supported. And as a result, because there was no infrastructure, because there were no government institutions that were supporting these people, they came up with the Naxalite movements. This was highly seen in what is called as the Red Corridor in India, especially in Chhattisgarh, in West Bengal, Odisha, and even in pockets of Maharashtra. And this Naxalite movement eventually went on to become Maoist movement, because certain thoughts of Mao got mixed with it, and that is how Maoism and Naxalism are similar. So Naxalism is a homegrown movement. Maoism is also a thought that is mixed with Naxalism, where certain principles and thoughts and ideology and indoctrinations happens with this particular section. Now what exactly happened over a period of time? Over a period of time, what happened? The government realized that we cannot make the earth red. That is, we cannot only go on a war with these section of the people, because they are our people. They have ideological differences. So let's make them green. So instead of the bloodbath, what we will provide is what is that they are asking for? What is that they are requesting for? So they brought about a metamorphological change, and this change is to provide infrastructure, this change is to provide basic amenities, this change is to understand the people in their own ways and means. And let's go back to what is called as tribal Panchashil, which Jawaharlal Nehru said. When there were questions about how to change the tribal people, many people said that they have to be made like the urban setup people who are in the city level. No, Nehru said no, let's not do that way. Why? Because that's the beauty of India, that's the diversity of India. These people, he introduced a concept called tribal Panchashil, which means 5 principles. And one such principle of tribal Panchashil is that these people will have to be allowed to learn in their own ways and means. They have a cultural milieu, they have a cultural beauty of their own. So if they wish to persist with their culture, let them persist with their culture, grow with their culture, and if they wish to at one particular moment of time, let them change the way they wish to according to their own cultural values and the system. This was a beautiful principle given by Jawaharlal Nehru in tribal Panchashil. So if you're writing your essay or in your answer writing in social issues or with respect to any of these, use these quotes. Tribal Panchashil, a beautiful concept that was enunciated by Jawaharlal Nehru. So what exactly happened? Because of couple of developmental programs and couple of other programs that the government of India initiated, what we have is drop of the Naxalite activities. So the author in this particular case goes on to say that Chhattisgarh has 14 districts affected by left-wing Naxalism activities. All of them are included in the security related infrastructure scheme of the MHA. So the Ministry of Home Affairs has 3 major schemes, namely security related expenditure scheme, special infrastructure scheme, and special central assistance scheme. Under the security related infrastructure, expenditure incurred by the states on the central armed police forces is reimbursed on 100% basis, while for the other items the reimbursement is made on the sharing basis in the ratio of 60:40. Then in SIS, it is implemented on sharing basis in the ratio of 60:40. Under SCA, it is for the public infrastructure. This is a 100% centrally sponsored scheme. So in order to change, they have been contributing on the infrastructure front, security front, because they have been able to upskill the infrastructure and also increase the security. The drop in the Naxalite activities have continued, says the author. The strategy and tactics of Indian Revolution document of the CPA clearly says, since there is no objective basis in India for exposing the parliamentary system from within, it can be best done by direct propaganda and organizing the people against the parliamentary and election system. So they did not want the people to participate in the elections, so they were asking people not to participate in the elections primarily because it will not serve their purpose. They were ideologically indoctrinating a certain section of the people, but people did realize that this is a fake journey, an ideological journey that the Maoists and the Naxalites have created, and this is not going to serve them as well. In fact, these people were also killed. In fact, these people were killed in such gruesome of the manner in case they happened to go against the dictates of the Maoists as well as the Naxalites. And the boycott by the Maoists had very few takers because they didn't realize that it was not working out for them, and ultimately they start moving away from them as well. If we have to take couple of other examples as well, there was less engagement of security forces in core areas. These Naxalites also faced a lot of fund crunch during demonetization and subsequently after that, and there was infrastructure developmental projects that took place. In few areas there was decrease in infrastructure projects, but overall they were able to change it. Social sector schemes were introduced in those areas, and they were top leadership in the Maoism. These people were killed or they lost their lives. Natural deaths happened. Maoists have been killed on their own on the suspicion of being police informers. They stopped trusting each other because they felt that one person was a police informer for the other. Its cadres and middle level leaders are increasing deserting the movement, and many people started leaving this particular movement. And there were two kinds of leadership. One is the old leadership, the other was the new leadership. So there was clash between the old leadership and the new leadership, and there was friction between them, and many people also came out of this movement. And these are the major reasons as to why there is drop in the number of people who have been entering the fold of the Maoism. So these are number of factors. So the author in this particular case goes on to say that in Chhattisgarh, the increase in the number of election related disputes are not happening because of the Maoists, primarily because of these reasons, says the author. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about fiber optic cables. If I ask you, how do you get your internet at your homes? We all get high speed internet. How do we get these high speed internet? Most of us, or some of us at least, would say that it is because of the satellites. Yes, to a limited extent, but most of us get it by optical fibers and not by the satellites. Yes, we have Elon Musk who is launching the satellites, and he is planning to come up with this internet directly from the satellites. In fact, when it comes directly from the satellites, what are the advantages? One, what we will have is a constant internet supply, and when it comes to the space related activities, there can be optical fibers which can be sabotaged, there can be optical fibers which can be cut off, but then when it comes to satellite, many people do not have the technology. So we have the satellite technology which is providing internet services in remote corners. That can be another advantage which the optical fibers may not be able to do. Let's say if you have a private agency like Airtel or Jio or so on and so forth, or Act Broadband, they would be able to invest on the infrastructure wherever they are able to generate the profit. But it's not the same when it comes to the satellite technology. It's not the same when it comes to the remote areas. Optical fibers may not go to the remote areas because they do not generate the profit. But when it comes to satellite technology, the remote areas will also get the internet. As of now, remember, most of us are getting the internet services because of the infrastructure laid by the private agencies, where optical fibers come up and give the internet, but we do not get the satellite based one. But in the near future, we will have the satellite based internet to the most part of the world and the remote corners. But as of now, as of today, most of it is by the optical fibers. So what are these optical fibers? They are made of thin cylindrical strands of glass. The diameter of a typical fiber is close to the diameter of a human hair. These fibers can carry information such as text, images, videos, telephone calls, and anything that can be encoded as digital information. Ultra thin fibers seem very fragile, but when manufactured correctly as a long threaded surrounded by protectives, they serve the purpose in a durable way. They are strong, light, and flexible, and ideal to be buried underground, drawn underwater, or bent around a spool. So it can be put in underground, it can be put in oceans where you have the connectivity. So it is the optical fibers which provide the internet connectivity. How does this work? When we speak about its working, we have the light, which is an electromagnetic wave with a spectrum of frequencies. Visible light. So when we say electromagnetic spectrum, what do we have? We have the visible light, X-rays, radio waves, and thermal radiation all lie on this spectrum. Humans can see the world around us via sunlight, but it took us a long time to control and guide light through the optical fibers. So it is through the mechanism of total internet. When we speak about how this entire functionality works, what we have is the refractive index, and at the same time we also have is the total internal reflection. So if this is the optical fiber, so what we have is the rays that is allowed to enter, and as a result what we will have is this light which is not allowed to come outside the optical fiber, and it remains within the optical fiber. So it hits with the cable and it goes back, it hits the cable and comes back. So there is a total internal reflection that is taking place. So it is this internal reflection that is helping and persisting this entire issue. Then we have the optical fiber communication, which consists of three parts. One is a transmitter which will transmit the information, it will send the information. Then what we have is the optical fiber which carries this information, and whatever is being sent by the transmitter will be received by the receiver, and ultimately what we have is the internet that is being provided to the people because of these three modules of the optical fiber communication. So the fiber optics technology has since been used in telecommunication, medical sciences, laser technology, and sensing, and these are the future of the internet penetration and the communication technology. So the author says that with the goal to secure communication and promoting quantum science, the Government of India announced national mission in the Union Budget of 2020. The proposed budget for this national mission on quantum technology and applications is 8,000 crores. So the government is also understanding the importance of it and is also investing a huge amount of money, so that what we have is an accelerated rate of infrastructural support by the government, says this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Guru Nanak Ji as well as Sikhism. He happens to be the first Guru of Sikhism. He is a founder of Sikhism. Let's understand some facts about Guru Nanak Ji. Nanak was born on April 15, 1469 in a Hindu family in the city of Nanak Sahib, which is part of Pakistan today. He was the first of the 10 Sikh Gurus and the founder of Sikhism. Sikhs believe that God is monistic and non-dual. He is the creator of the universe, whose existence and continued survival depends on His will. God is both Saguna, that is with attributes, and Nirguna, that is without attributes, that is form and formless, and is called by names such as Tat, Satguru, Akal Purkh, Karkar, as well as Vahiguru. The Khalsa symbolizes the coalescence of serenity and strength, purity and power, Shastra, and the power of wisdom, Jnana Shakti, and the power of action, Kriya Shakti. And when it comes to Sikhism, there are 5 Ks, which includes Kesha, Khanga, Kara, Kacha, as well as Kirpan. These are some of the important facts with respect to Sikhism as well as Guru Nanak Ji, which can be probably be asked in your preliminary examination. So kindly remember these facts. Now let's look into the next article. This article says, as deaths due to work-related factors grow up, ILO, the International Labour Organization, reports urges countries to strengthen the safety net. What does this article speak about? The article says that we have these laborers or people working in the industrial setup who have been working for long duration of time. Because they work in long duration of time, there is not enough rest, and at the same time they are also into physical work. They also inhale gases which may not be that good for them. So as a result, there are a number of people who are passing away. What are the reasons? One is long working hours, particulate matter gases and fumes, injuries, asbestos, silica which is inhaled, asthmagens, UV radiation, diesel engine exhaust, arsenic, nickel which is inhaled, and because of this many people are passing away. So the author in this particular case goes on to say that we have 2 conventions. One is International Labour Organization Occupational Safety and Health Convention, and we also have Promotional Framework for the Occupational Safety and Health Convention of 2006. Is India signatory to these 2 conventions? No, India is not a signatory to both these conventions, another important factor. So the report says and has recommended 5 categories of fundamental principles and rights at work for ensuring safety. These include freedom of association and effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining, elimination of forced or compulsory labor, abolition of the child labor, elimination of discrimination in respect of employment, and occupation and a safe and healthy working environment. These are some of the recommendations given by the International Labour Organizations. So if you are liking our initiatives, please to like the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also share it with your fellow aspirants as well. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.